What did you make when you see all these exit polls that Trump is doing better with black people, with Latinos, with Muslims?
Let's not buy into these narratives about Latino men and, black men and all this. Remember who we're actually fighting here, which is the billionaire class.
I have a lot of people who are saying to me, well, she lost because this country hates women. That is not a singular issue.
The whole idea of a Joe Rogan of the left is silly.
J.D. Vance has the charisma of a pot plant. He's not going to win on his own. I refuse to believe
rude
that.
to succulents.
They have no stance. They have no spine other than to try to serve billionaires differently than Republicans.
Yes. Forget about the price of milk. What about the regulation of milk? It's going to be like, nah, yes. That's not legal anymore.
Like, this is f***ed up because AIPAC. This is f***ed up because corruption.
Just to be clear, Amanda, my position also is this shit is f***ed up. I'm Mehdi Hasan.
I'm Amanda Seales.
I'm Francesca Fiorentini.
And we're not kidding. It's the podcast from Zateo in which I get to sit down and talk about serious stuff with funny people, but also some funny stuff, I hope, as well. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show, Amanda Seales, a comedian, actor, podcaster, radio host. And welcome to the show for the first time, Francesca Fiorentini, comedian also. Someone you often see on Piers Morgan these days, fighting with all sorts of ghouls, as she likes to put it. Political commentator. One is in New York, one is in LA, I'm in DC. Guess what we're talking about today, guys? How are you feeling? How are you feeling about the world? How are you feeling about living in America, Amanda?
I just always laugh that when you do these podcasts, you dress down. Like, I'm so used to seeing you in a suit.
I love the way you say dress down. You mean I just dress when I'm not wearing a suit and tie?
Like, I'm wearing a hoodie for the cast.
I thought you meant dressing us down. Like, dressing me now. Which, by the way, host of the Bitchuation Room podcast, Mehdi. I got to get up the plugs before we dig into the stuff.
Fantastic podcaster, Francesca Fiorentini of the Bitchuation podcast, which I need to go on at some point soon.
Please.
I've got a podcast, Small Doses. I got the radio show, the Amanda Seales Show. We do stuff.
And how are you feeling about doing stuff in this new post-November 5th world, Amanda?
I mean, I think it's really honestly just been fascinating to see the various reactions of people that I just didn't see coming. Like I had no idea that so many people would feel compelled to come to me and say, you lost the election. It's your fault. You and your anti-Kamala rhetoric, which I didn't know that I was doing. But according to them, any challenging of Democrats or any urging of Democrats to do the things that could win them an election was considered anti-Kamala. So, I had someone threaten to fight me. Like, I had someone literally text me, like, I will smack you when I see you. I will smack the shit out of you when I see you. And I sent her my address.
Oh, you said well, next time you come on the show, you can let us know how that went. Francesca, have you got into any proposed fight duels post-election?
Sadly, no, not yet. But I can only imagine that continuing to expose myself to the far right on shows like Piers Morgan will inevitably lead to some amount of doxing in this next new world order we're entering into. But I agree with Amanda. Like, I've gotten it from all sides, whether it is, leading to the Trump victory because of my critiques around Gaza, or whether it was, from the other side of people who thought that throwing down and saying you should vote strategically for Kamala Harris was a mistake, and on and on and on. I think at this point, for better or worse, we're all kind of in the same boat. Mehdi, I haven't been on your show, but I congratulate you on everything you've done since MSNBC, and yet I was so sad when you were let go, because in many ways you were kind of this like trial balloon for someone like me in the progressive liberal media space. I had a special on MSNBC. So I've been thinking a lot about media and the ways that you see CNN and MSNBC and mainstream news sort of fall back into the, orange man bad mania, as they always do, while never giving space to actual deep dive investigative journalism that informs people in a way they should be. That's all gone now because Trump sells and everyone buys into it, and no one's actually doing that deeper work, and it's cheaper. it's cheaper, but at what cost?
It's also lazy, right? So we talk about, Amanda mentioned people blaming her. Obviously, there's been a blame game since November 5th. And there should be. We live in a democracy. You're supposed to have accountability. You're supposed to say, okay, what went wrong? Why didn't we win? Why did the voters reject us in this massive way across demographics, counties, states? Trump put together. We'll talk about Trump in a moment, his coalition. But just in terms of the accountability, I feel like, Amanda, you said your friend, or former friend, who challenged you, whoever reached out to you to challenge you. I feel like the people were ready. Tell me if you think I'm wrong about this. People were ready with pre-prepared hot takes as to why Kamala won/lost based on the result. And no one actually looked at the result and just started dishing out their takes based on their priors. So you look at John Fetterman tweeting, Dearborn voted for Trump. Well, good luck to you with the Muslim ban. And it's like, well, actually, I don't think you can say that Muslims cost Kamala Harris the election. I know that a lot of Muslim activists wanted to say we cost Kamala Harris the election over Gaza. We could talk about Gaza. But they lost across the board. She lost every swing state.
Yeah.
She lost with Latinos. She lost across demographics. And I just feel like people just come along with these takes being like, you're to blame, this person's to blame. It's so lazy fundamentally. And cable news goes to all these. They had Hillary Clinton's, one of her guys, on the show talking about why. Shut up. You lost in 2016. Why are you on the show in 2024 telling us why people lost? And that's my big problem.
It's all intellectual laziness, though, right? That's really where we are. We're just in I call it the age of idiocy. We're just in a really intellectually lazy season that seems to continue and is perpetuated by the same media spaces that Francesca was just talking about. It's really about how do we get clicks? It's how do we get hot takes, et cetera. And typically, the intellectually fortified folks aren't giving them the hot takes that they really want. Toxicity sells, and ignorance is something that I think people like to gawk at this point. So it's extended beyond watching reality TV and being like, wow, those people's lives are terrible, to now watching the news and watching panelists and being like, wow, these people don't know what they're talking about, but I'm going to watch. It's very pervasive. And I also just feel like folks are living in their own pools of confirmation bias. So I have a lot of people who are saying to me, well, she lost because this country hates women. That is not a singular issue. Just like there's not single issue voters for Palestine. That's not a single issue. This country hates women. This country also is really about optics. This country also has a lot of people that care about genocide not happening on their watch. This country also very much continues the practice of not educating people on how systems work. There's so
They also
many
didn't like the price
places.
of eggs in 2022 and 2023.
Yeah,
and still don't like the price of eggs. There's a lot of blame to go around. Yeah.
Just invest in a chicken, people. Can we just do this already? Build yourself a coop on your rooftop, share it with your neighbor. That's the echo chamber is so interesting because some of us are in echo chambers that then we subject to the nation, like mainstream news outlets, right? And it's very funny that you have all these former Republicans / current Republicans, your Scarboroughs, your Nicole Wallaces, who are immediately going to it's the wokeism of the Democratic Party. Just how on brand is it for you to say that? And you're ostensibly on a liberal news network. Who's a fish out of water here? Who belongs here and who doesn't? So let's stop taking, these lessons from Republicans about what the Democrats did wrong. You're the ones who walked us into the lion's den of Trumpism in the first place.
And I got to say, the left is not innocent of this either. I had a chat with Owen Jones on a show we do for Zateo about Bernie Sanders came out very quickly to say, well, the Democrats abandoned the working class and that's why we lost. I think that's part of it. But to say that's what it's all about and not take on board the racism, the misogyny, the inflation. Also, Bernie, to be fair to Bernie, was defending Biden a few weeks ago saying he was the most pro-worker president. So I think everyone wants to just confirm their priors, the confirmation bias that Amanda talked about. I'm as guilty of it as anyone else, but I try and stop myself and I try and read people I don't agree with in order to try and get a sense of, all right, but maybe it's not just all about my left-wing biases. I got to ask you both, though. All three of us are people of color. What did you make when you see all these exit polls that Trump is doing better with black people, with Latinos, with Muslims than Republicans have done for a while? I just want to read these stats to you. This was the best Republican showing with 18 to 29-year-olds for 20 years. It was the best showing with black voters for 48 years, and it was the best Republican showing with Latinos for 52 years. What was your reaction, guys, to that when you hear stuff like that?
I mean, it's super disappointing when you hear those stats. And so I'm of two minds. On the one hand, I think it is really important to understand that white supremacist, fascistic thinking can be extended to many, many people of different races and ethnicities and cultural backgrounds, especially in the United States. Whiteness has been a historic process. Italians weren't considered white, Irish weren't considered white. Now they are. And I think Latino voters, for example, are sort of on that precipice. But the cost is what? You always have to buy into anti-blackness. And that is I think African Americans never are afforded this unless you're, Candace Owens or whatnot. So that's one thing. But I look to like movement leaders, and Working Families Party has done an amazing job, and other folks who are saying, look, even though we see these exit polls, let's not let them divide us, not let them divide the working class, the 99%, however you want to call it. Let's not buy into these narratives about Latino men and, black men and all this. Let's remember, keep our eye on the prize, remember who we're actually fighting here, which is the billionaire class.
They're not fighting them, though. They want to be them. And I think that's the part that we have to reimagine what our communities look like outside of lines of culture and tradition and race and ethnicity, to really look at values, because that's what I think is actually differentiating us. I can say that I am in the same pool of bullshit that Black people have to put up with, right? But I respond differently to that than some other folks that may have same bullshit, right? Like you said, like Kundis, like she's going to respond differently than I would. And so I think what we're looking at is how there are groups that are within groups that are aligning themselves with certain American ideals that are outside of their cultural and ethnic realities within this American like social structure. And it's confusing because we're looking at it like, they don't like you, right? Like they don't like you, but they're like, no, but they could, and I want in. It's really, if you can't beat them, join them.
Yes, 100%.
And it's obviously certain groups. I see it. I'm not going to speak for Latino folks, but I look at the polling that a big chunk of Latino folks don't define themselves as people of color. And I do look at the Muslim community, which has its own anti-black tendencies, even though millions of Muslims are black Muslims. But in the Muslim leadership and the Muslim space, we talk about Muslims in America as if they're only Arab Americans or Pakistani Americans, etc. That's clearly, I don't know if you saw, I did an interview with an imam, a Yemeni American imam who endorsed Trump at his rally in Michigan. Deeply depressing interview for me to be talking to Muslim leaders who really think Trump's going to be good to them. Like, as you say, man, he'll be good to us. He'll like us. He might not like those other people, but he's promised us he likes us. And that is a fundamental problem, I think, for a lot of communities. On the money side, Amanda, you said something that jumped out at me. You said, they want to be billionaires. Yeah. I saw some polling this week that showed that Trump voters, despite being sold as the left behind, anti-establishment, white working class coal miners, tend to be people who admire the wealthy, which actually shouldn't surprise us because they're all voting for this guy who they think is a successful billionaire businessman. He's not a billionaire and he's not a successful businessman. But I think that is part of the mythos as well around Trump in particular. Do you guys think that if Trump ever leaves the scene, God help us, if he's not with us for the rest of our lives, if he actually does retire from politics, can the Republicans replicate what they just did? Part of me feels that a lot of this is just about Trump. Yeah. That there isn't, the only good news is there isn't a mini Trump 2 waiting in the wings.
It's not transferable. I mean, you see Carrie Lake losing her election in the Senate, and you see, Mark Robinson is ridiculous, but it is just not a transferable, vibe, zhuzh, whatever. And
we hope, inshallah.
Yes, inshallah, right? And even I'm very excited. The one thing I'm looking forward to, other than the general strike in 2028, is when the Republican Party tries to convince Trump to not try to stay in power after 4 years and to pass the baton to J.D. Vance, because that's going to be beautiful. Because they will run Trump in a sort of like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles like brain situation where he's just sort of like a floating brain inside of a robot that Elon Musk has created. Like they'll run him as long as he has any little like firings left. Once the Neuralink implant works, they'll run Trump forever. But like, so I am looking forward to that future fight.
I mean, the big question is, does he actually vacate the scene? Some of us think actually he's the kind of guy who would happily run for a third term if he can find a way to justify it. J.D. Vance has the charisma of a pot plant. He's not going to win on his own. I refuse to believe
rude
that.
to succulents.
I know, so rude to succulents.
Very
One question I do want to ask you before we talk about the future, and I do want to talk about what's coming next.
Wait, I didn't get to say anything about that.
Please, talk about succulents.
I prefer succulent. Because I was about to go in. No, like we saw technology advance. We've seen technology advance at like this astonishing rate, right? And it's advancing at a rate faster than ever it has before. And I just have this feeling that now we're watching like the process towards the collapsing of this whole thing start to also pick up speed, in the sense that this is the first time that I ever felt that ignorance was not bliss, and that it was actually knowledge that had a lot of people that I knew feeling very at peace with whatever happened, because they knew that whether it was Trump or Kamala, the system itself, the establishment itself, is incredibly dysfunctional. And I know that 4 years ago, I didn't even know that. Like 4 years ago, I as just like I'm a knowledgeable person, but as an entertainer, I wouldn't have considered myself someone who was politically savvy. And 4 years ago, I did not have common knowledge about the complete dysfunctionality of this government. Whereas I find myself now amongst a lot more people on a regular level, like not like Mehdi, who is like involved in this thing, like just regular people who are like, this shit is fucked up. And let me tell you why, right? Not like, oh, this is fucked up because inflation. Like this is fucked up because APAC. This is fucked up because corruption. This is like, so I do believe that there's a certain level of like, yes, Trump, yes, Republicans, but there's a bigger thing happening here where more people are starting to see beyond the limitations of like just Trump being a problem or even Republicans being a part of the problem, to see, oh, this is an American cultural problem that this country itself is fucked up.
Just to be clear, Amanda, despite working in the media as a political journalist for 25 years and working for elite media on both sides of the Atlantic, my position also is this shit is fucked up, as the best summary.
No, but I'm saying that you, yes, and I appreciate this shit is fucked up is the high level of our ivory tower version of it. Yes.
And I think this is, just quickly, it's a moment to bring liberals into the fold. Those who didn't have that structural analysis, thought maybe Democrats had it together, then look at the $450,000 that was spent to splash Kamala Harris's face on the dome in Las Vegas, the blob, and are like, maybe this wasn't the best use of funds.
But I think it's shedding labels like liberal, though, right? It's like, that to me, I think, is part of what's has to happen right now. There has to be a lot of shedding, like even like Republicans shedding, like, am I a Republican? What does that even mean at this point? I don't even know what that means at this point to them.
They're just a cult, but even the Democrats have taken on cult-like characteristics, especially over Gaza that we talked about earlier. This idea that the reaction to Biden and Harris doing a genocide, refusing to budge on doing a genocide, even when they're told they'll lose key states for doing a genocide, and the reaction from a lot of the voters is to say, you bastards, rather than say, why didn't Biden and Harris budge on the genocide, right? That's just like Occam's razor. Like, why not just say the easier option would have been budge on the genocide, rather than we're going to blame people in Michigan who didn't want to vote for the people who got their cousins and uncles and aunts and siblings killed in Gaza. For me, that's really bad. But what's frustrating on the other end, and let me both sides this, is I'm also a little bit upset with some of my leftist friends and Muslim friends who told me for 6 months that when we force Harris to lose Michigan, Democrats will listen to us. No, they won't. Democrats always shift right after losing an election. Now is not going to be any other different time. I don't think Muslims or the left have gained any particular political leverage after the result in Michigan. I don't think Democrat strategists are waking up today going, if only we'd been more tougher on Netanyahu. Maybe they're briefing that in private to people. And I saw some stories saying that, we wanted to do more to split, but I don't think they're going to do that in any policy terms. In fact, I think the whole Democratic Party in Congress now under Hakeem Jeffries is going to move to the right on Israel to try and keep track with Netanyahu and Kushner and all the freaks he puts in power. So unfortunately, it was a lose-lose in that situation. I do want to ask about the media, just return back to the media very quickly. In all the fallouts and post-mortems, one thing that's popped up everywhere is, what about Joe Rogan? Why didn't Harris go on Joe Rogan? Do Democrats need their own Joe Rogan? Francesca, what is your reaction when you hear the words Joe Rogan?
I mean, watch your drink, number one. But also, Rogan has mass appeal. There's also a lot of women that listen to Rogan, even though it's predominantly men. I had an anti-vax vegan hairdresser who I had to break up with because I was like, please get vaccinated. She was great. It was very sad. But she listened to Rogan all the time. And I'm like, that checks out. So he's massive. I mean, he does have a special sauce, dare I say Trumpian. And he also wasn't necessarily always a right-winger, right? He just allowed a bunch of Nazis to come on and didn't challenge them, but he also had Bernie Sanders on, and and Democrats attacked him. How dare you go on, Joe Rogan? Well, because he's massive. So, but to me, like the whole idea of a Joe Rogan of the left is silly, because Joe Rogan is who he is because he is just a mainstream ass character that speaks to like fragile men, and part of that is kind of punching left and also down and at women and at trans people and at people of color and mocking them. And that is not something that I think the left would want to replicate. However, I do think we have to understand that when someone is massive, go with that. Here, my example is this. If the Hawk Tuah girl wants to talk about socialism tomorrow, she's another white girl that got a massive podcast deal because they really spawn them like crazy. Go with it. Let Hawk Tuah girl have Noam Chomsky on, and the two of them can battle. Have Hawk Tuah girl, have Mehdi on.
Isn't the bigger problem though, Francesca, that let's say Harris was in negotiations with Joe Rogan to go on the show, it didn't work out, blah, blah, blah. History will remember that. Isn't the bigger problem that if Kamala Harris had gone on Joe Rogan, it wouldn't have been very good? Isn't the bigger problem that you actually need a candidate who can speak to an audience like Rogan's in a direct, normal, blunt, dare I say, populist fashion? And
100%.
That's the bigger issue. When people say Bernie went on Rogan, the issue is not that Bernie went on Rogan. The issue is that Bernie can actually speak in a way that Rogan followers might appreciate. And I think Democrats need to get out of that technocratic. They had Tim Walz. Here's my big frustration. In all the post-mortems, no one talks about the fact, I know vice presidents don't win elections, but the idea that Tim Walz, someone I pushed for her to pick.
That's not true. That's not true. Because part of the reason why Biden won was because he got a black woman vice president, and many people were like, okay, now I'll vote for you.
But he also had Jim Clyburn giving him the black. But my point is, in general, vice
no
presidents
one knew who Jim Clyburn was. Go ahead.
In South Carolina, they don't. But yes, without wanting to
South
relitigate
Carolina
Biden.
is not the nation. But
I know,
go
but
ahead.
Joe Biden's won this candidacy in South Carolina. Anyway, let's put
I
that
love
to one
this.
side.
Wait, first of all, Amanda very much able to like go toe to toe with Mehdi on some of the like quick little.
She'll beat the shit out of me.
No, I will not. But I'm just like,
Right.
I just want to be clear.
Keep going.
No, it's important.
Okay,
It's
let me
important
rephrase it. Let me rephrase
no,
it
let me tell you why it's important. Let me tell you why it's important. Because she came out with this I'm the black woman like VP role, and so many of black women that I know were like, I wasn't going to vote for Joe Biden until now, and I'm going to push everybody to do it. But then she sat back. And even when she came back out this time, she wasn't talking in the way that you're like what you're saying. She wasn't able to talk to people like that.
She did for like a week, right? And then the Democratic consultant class got to her and they shut it all down. And then she turned up on The View and Sonny says to her, what would you do differently to Biden? For me, that was the moment of the campaign. And she goes, I wouldn't do anything different to Biden. And you're like, why the fuck are you running then? Right? Because they don't want Biden Mark II. And Tim Walz is a good example of that, where they picked Tim Walz, Coach Walz. He's all over cable saying Republicans are weird. It's going viral. Republicans are getting really upset about being called weird. Donald Trump is opening every rally being like, I'm not weird. We're not weird. And then suddenly they shut him down. Walz disappears. Nobody says the word weird again. I'm like, why? Why would you do that? And that is the Democratic Party consultant class that makes money whether they win or lose and gets to be on CNN afterwards saying, well, this is what they should do in the next campaign.
And their marketing is about centralizing Democrats. Their marketing is not about bringing people in. It's about bringing people right. And and her marketing team had one black person on it, literally. but yet their marketing plan was like, we're just going to tell everybody, like, vote for her because she's Black. And I'm like, your base is more than just Black people. And it's more than just people that will just vote for you just because you're Black.
Yeah, I was just going to say with the Tim Walz thing, I was really hoping we would hear Kamala Harris sort of lift up some of these incredibly progressive programs that he was able to pass in Minnesota, free lunch programs, enshrining abortion rights, on and on and on. And you didn't hear any of that. And I think it's really important. Not only did Joe Biden pick Kamala Harris, which I will concede perhaps was a factor and got people on board in 2020. But he also did a lot of other overtures to other communities. The Bernie Sanders coalition brought him in specifically, had multiple discussions and conversations with groups like Sunrise Movement, Justice Democrats. That was all happening while simultaneously BLM in 2020 was popping off. And say what you will about the performative nature of Democrats in that moment and corporations like Amazon, but there was an overture to say, yes, Nancy Pelosi's going to kneel in a kente cloth. Imagine Pelosi putting on a keffiyeh in the last year and saying anything, right, about the number of Palestinians being murdered. The point is this, they actually listened to the base that was saying criminal justice reform, stop killing unarmed Black people, as well as we want progressive programs. And yeah, we would love a woman of color as vice president.
Amanda, are you worried that we're going backwards now if we were even going forwards?
Oh, yeah, we're not going forwards. I mean, we're going, I don't even know where we're going, but it's not positive.
It's a crab walk.
It's just, I think, and also when you say we, I'm just like, even we is like really splintered in terms of, who's considered we, because some would say, well, we're doing exactly what we need to be doing. And others are like, no, we're not. And then others are like, I don't care. So I think when it comes to I just feel like this whole situation was a fuck up. Like the whole election itself it's not talked about in the context of the fact that like no one chose Kamala Harris. Like the people did not even choose her. And then they didn't know how to speak to those people. I've seen so many young people talking about their experiences working with different Democratic campaigns across the nation, like locally, to get the word out, and just what they were facing in terms of not being heard, in terms of just being confused as to why certain bases were being ignored, whether it's Spanish speakers or, Black folks, et cetera, young folks. And so I wonder, again, with this whole Democrat thing, it's like, this is a failed party. That's what when I see the Democrats, I see a failed party. I don't know what your banner is. I don't know what you're about. Like at one point it's like, okay, if you don't vote for us, you're not Black. Well, that's just not accurate. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, just felt like, well, at least I know what this person is. And so I'm just going to ride with that, which sucks because what he is trash. But the Democrats have no stance. They have no spine other than to try to serve billionaires differently than Republicans.
Amanda, you said a good line just now. You said, what is the we? And we are splintered, and definitely, especially between liberals and leftists, between different ethnic groups. What Trump does is he does bring the liberal left together, right? For 4 years, people were focused on the threat from Trump. So Trump is coming in January 20th, 2025. What does we look like in 2025? Francesca, what is last time round in January 2017, we had the Women's March. We had #resistance immediately starting. We had ACLU with record donations. We had New York Times with record subscribers.
Yeah.
What does it look like January 20th, 2025? I suspect not the same.
No, I don't think so. In part because I think some of those institutions let a lot of people down. I mean, the Women's March sort of imploded. I think a lot of people have lost trust in a place like the New York Times and certainly, Washington Post owned by Bezos and whatnot. So I think there will be resistance, but it's going to happen in different areas. It's going to look differently. It might be more local. It might be more radical. And I think that's wonderful. I think it's really funny what Amanda's saying is like, we don't know who the we is, because me is like, how do I get involved locally? Let me talk to my neighbors. Let me make sure we all have our numbers, emergency contacts. I've got you. Like, I think there might be people in my neighborhood who are, of mixed status when it comes to immigration. Let me make sure that I've got their backs. But then I also have some MAGA flags near me. And it's like, okay, well then and or people who just voted for Trump who are like, nah, I'm just going to wait till people get deported. You know, like I'm just going to sit here and wait until like, you know, day laborers are just picked up off their jobs. I mean, so it's a hard time to say, let's build community when so many voted against it. But I just want to, let's come back to the fact that truly the popular vote was won by what, 2% now we're looking at?
Yes.
Like, and mostly the narrative is still people stayed home. People stayed home and they could have come out.
Crucial.
And to Amanda's point, look, the Democratic brand is weak. I don't know if it's actually salvageable. Honestly, I don't know if it's salvageable at this point. It is so weak that people would rather throw down with a brand that they know and they understand.
I'm going to push back a little bit on that. One is I agree with you on the turnout. I mean, most people don't know that more people stayed at home in this election than voted for either Trump or Harris, which is an indictment of our democracy like no other. And I think you're right about the turnout. You know, it's a huge problem in our country. I don't think the Democratic Party's done because it's such a partisan country. People are super partisan. At the end of the day, she picked up 70 plus million votes. And the problem we have in this country and why we don't have a multi-party system, where we have stuck with this duopoly, is because people are just basically lazily stuck with a two-party system. You could run whoever you want as a Democrat or a Republican, and they'll both get 60 to 70 million people. As we're seeing with the Republican Party. They ran a convicted criminal, found liable for sexual abuse, twice impeached. Tens of millions happily voted for him. Some unhappily voted for him, but voted for him because he's the Republican candidate. So I think, well, as long as we have this two-party system, it ain't dying anytime soon. Sorry, Jill Stein. And I think that is a reality we're going to have to deal with and work around. Amanda, let me just come back to you on January 20th. What are you, dare I ask, and maybe it's the wrong question, but what are you most worried about, concerned about from a Trump second term? What's high on your mind when you think of Trump as president?
I just think he's going to create a vigilante energy around individuals where everybody feels like they are tasked with carrying out his policies. And also, if it's not that they're tasked with carrying out his policies, it's that they have to protect themselves at all costs. So there's an individualism that I think is going to really spread in very sincere and weaponized ways. We can start with just even this whole, we're going to do a forced deportation scenario, right? And when they start using language like we're going to find undocumented workers who need to be removed, that then says to me, we're welcoming you to tell us. And we have seen already that people feel like if I do this thing, if I help you, then you're going to help me. And that quid pro quo mindset, which is not actual, by the way, but which people think it is how we get into a world and a society that is militarized without even having to say it in name. Like people are acting as their own version of the Gestapo. And we've seen that in World War II. I mean, we saw that in Germany just with Jewish people, but here there's a number of like criminalized individuals, whether it's people that are seeking abortions or doctors that are helping folks. You know, we're going to see this really big brother energy coming. And like you said, Francesca, it becomes, well, who really is community? Oh, and that is what I fear.
It's interesting that you make the point that, you know, in other places it was one group, and in Trump's America it's multiple groups, right? It is the undocumented, it is the trans kid, it is the woman going out of state for an abortion, it is Muslims, it is Jews, it is go down the list of all the communities. Someone made a good point recently on Twitter, I can't remember who said the main reason for the left to pick Harris over Trump, even if they're annoyed about and angry about Harris and Gaza, is that at least in a Harris presidency you'd be able to focus on Gaza.
Yeah.
Under a Trump presidency, there's going to be 100 fires to put out. Yeah. Gaza will be one of them, which I thought was a rather dark, depressing, but brilliant point. And I feel it already. I feel like already, I was talking to my team about this earlier today, like already I feel like we're getting stretched now in different directions. Like Trump is doing this and doing that. And like, what do we cover? Like there's going to be so much chaos. You know, flood the zone with shit is what Steve Bannon said. The silver lining to that is that I do feel like that's a quicker route to people getting fed up. Okay. And that has always been the only method of change, is the people exercising their own power. I mean, how much power can we exercise if we're unvaccinated, Francesca? I mean,
we're getting mad cow from all this raw milk that is being thrust on us. I mean, forget about the price of milk. What about the regulation of milk? It's going to be like, nah, that's not legal anymore.
Francesca, she should have run on what you just said. Forget the price of milk. What about the regulation of milk?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, these people are nuts. They're literally going to put nutty people like RFK Jr. in charge of public health.
And I am worried, honestly, as people who do, media and content for obviously the internet and podcasting, like all the ways that we could be truly censored and actually truly canceled in what is to come under Trump, whether it's, mentioning Palestine. We're already seeing nonprofits being threatened with their 501c3 status revoked for advocating, obviously, for Palestinians, although they call it terrorism. But I agree with Amanda that like it's a time to get active. But again, the accelerationism I like, and I don't think you're being accelerationist. I'm just saying like, don't be surprised at how much a lot of people will roll over. I mean, you already had Kamala Harris. She conceded with less than 24 hours. You have Joe Biden saying, well, they chose another vision. So, hey, meanwhile, they were saying this was the greatest threat to our democracy.
Yep.
Who's leading us? At this time in 2016, Barack Obama was windsurfing with Richard Branson. I mean, it's absurd, the kind of leadership that we have. We only have one another. And I will also say a big pitch for just doing something that's fun and productive, not windsurfing, but like going to see comedy, supporting comedians, doing something generative in your community, getting involved with the community garden, a community kitchen, like your religious communities, like all of these places. Every time you wrest some mental and creative space away from the fascism, I think is really productive for all of us.
Yeah.
That is fantastic.
I mean, I had
advice.
to leave Instagram for that reason because it's like people want you to live in that.
I'm considering leaving Twitter, which I never thought I would do in 14 years, but I'm seeing people heading different ways. And I don't know if I can do it.
You can do it.
Look, Francesca, what you just said, people go and lie on couches and pay good money for. So I will take that free advice from you. Let's wrap on a positive note and say, where can people come and support you two? Where can they hear your comedy and your analysis? I just want you both to tell people where to find Amanda Seales and Francesca Fiorentini. Amanda.
You can catch me on my Patreon, Amanda Seales. I'm over there cultivating a whole community of people with common sense and actual compassion. So I've left Instagram. So if you want to hear my thoughts and things, then go over there. You can also check out my latest project, my one-woman show, What Would the Ancestors Say? I did a live stream of that, but I am also going to be re-releasing it, and you'll be able to purchase it on my Patreon. You can check out my radio show, The Amanda Seales Show, every day, and my podcast, Small Doses, once a week.
I don't know how we had time to even book you for today, given what you're up to. Francesca.
I mean, I'll be raising a 2-year-old. And yes, you can find me on the Bitchuation Room podcast, wherever your podcast, but live Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays on youtube.com/FrannyFio, FRANIFIO. 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. What else? I'm going to be doing some live shows. I'm going to try and see whether LA, come on, Angelinos, come out. All right. I know I'm not super famous. I'm not Amanda Seales or whatever, but come out. No, come support.
Unnecessary shade.
No, that's just me being like, that's just me fangirling. So I'll get Amanda on the show too, but hopefully we'll have like a monthly space for some good comedy, political analysis, and, maybe a cry or two.
And make sure the 2-year-old gets all their shots before January 20th, 2025. Because
Tell me about it. I'm like, can she get an HPV? I know you're like a toddler, but like,
hilarious.
Can you get it now?
Get it early before RFK takes over. And on that dark and dystopian note, I'm Mehdi Hasan.
I'm Amanda Seales.
And I'm Francesca Fiorentini.
And we were not kidding. Thank you. We're Not Kidding is a Zeteo production. I'm your host, Mehdi Hasan, and today's co-hosts were Amanda Seales and Francesca Fiorentini. Our executive producer is Kieran Alvey. Our senior producer and editor is Frank Capello. Our music was composed by Andy Clausen. Our design is by Alicia Taytone. Our mix engineer is Valentino Rivera. And the title card animation is by Ehsan Mezghali.